cooking segment will be part of that.
Yes, good. Looking forward.
Yeah.
But so good morning, everyone, and wanted to look at, we've been looking at synagogues and unique synagogues and communities all over the world. Today, I wanted to kind of take a step back to look at the architecture of synagogues, and actually we'll look at some older synagogues, but also some of the most recent synagogues to be built and how synagogue architecture is changing to meet kind of architectural designs of the times. And the truth is, it was one architect I read put it, a synagogue is an architect's dream to build, because there really are no, with the exception of needing an ark for the Torah, and you have a davening stand, there really is kind of an open canvas as to what a synagogue can look like. And so throughout history, many synagogues have been built in the style of the place that they were in. I mean, we saw, for instance, there's many Moorish revival synagogues, but based on a style that kind of harkens back to a golden age, Al-Andalus in Spain. But you look at synagogues around the world kind of represent, in many cases, the architecture of the place they were built. In fact, one that I want to share right now is a synagogue in Casale Monferrato, which is in northern Italy, near Turin, Italy. As was the case with many synagogues of this era, it's housed right in this nondescript building. Many synagogues throughout Europe were housed in nondescript buildings simply because they didn't want to draw attention to themselves. The more elaborate synagogues were often built after Jews had gained emancipation in their communities. The earliest was in the French Revolution in the late 18th century, and then following in other communities where these grandiose synagogues were built. But inside this building, which you would only know houses a synagogue because it has the sign that it's a Jewish museum and synagogue at the top. If that sign weren't there, you would have no idea, but today that's what's there. But inside is perhaps the most magnificent example of Baroque architecture, a synagogue built in 1595 in the height of the Baroque period. And we'll look inside. This is Casale Monferrato, and we'll look at the synagogue. I'll try to do this slowly. I think we have some pictures and also kind of a 360 view. I'll try to move slowly, but as you look through this synagogue, still standing from 1595, you would never know it from the outside, but really built in as a magnificent example of the Baroque architecture of its time. And let me know if there's any issue with it working. I'll try to move slowly around. But you'll see as we go around, quotes from scripture and from Jewish tradition written alongside the wall. These are from Psalms and from other writings. Lev tahor barali Elohim, Baruch nachon chadesh bekirbi, ka'ayal ta'arog. And I'll just rotate around.
How old is this synagogue again?
The synagogue was built in the year 1595.
Wow. And how many times has it been renovated? Many times?
Sorry?
Has it been renovated or refurbished many times?
It's been refurbished some, but really this is the original synagogue building in its original space, in a street that really was the Jewish area and eventually became kind of the Jewish ghetto in this particular community. There were many other synagogues like this in northern Italy, in the Piedmont region. Most don't exist today. This is one of the few and probably the most magnificent example of a classic Baroque architecture.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
What are those large candle holders? They don't look very Jewish. The ones that had many candles in them.
You're saying that the lights that are...
No, those are light fixtures toward the bima.
So let's move, we'll continue to move towards the bima here.
Yeah, these with many little candles.
Many candles.
That does not look very Jewish to me.
It's a good question.
Maybe they were once for light. Is that possible?
They could have once been for light. and you actually see the candle, the menorah candelabra
Right.
here in the front.
Right.
It's a good question. It could be for light or for design. I mean, this could be part of Baroque traditional design, these particular lights. If anyone has any information about it, I could look into that.
Is it-
Oh, and
Is it
Where's
still
the-
in use today?
It is still in use today. It's mostly a museum because there just isn't such a large Jewish community, but it is still, there still are occasionally prayer services that take place here.
Do we know anything about?
There's no balcony for the women. They would have sat on one side and the men on the other side.
there it is. Up
There
on
are these
top.
small balconies.
There is a balcony, yeah.
There are two small balconies, one on either side. Or maybe it's just that one. I thought there was one, but maybe there's just that small balcony.
Do we know
So-
anything about the community that built this synagogue, that used this synagogue?
Casale Monferrato was built, there was a Jewish community that was, as in many of the communities in northern Italy. I don't have that much information about the community that was there. It was an Italian Jewish community that was in existence even before this synagogue was built, and has archives there actually, books printed and ketubas and documents from Jewish life in this community from the year 1600 to 1900 are all housed actually in the archives in this community. So here I can pull up the first Pinkas, the first kind of documents from the Jewish community, date from 1589. And so the Jews have lived there from even before then. And there's talk that some Jews had resided there even earlier. So I don't have that much information about the specific community. And maybe if you want to do some research, you can help share in a future session. But
Time on my hands, maybe I will.
But I just pulled up a little here to share with you. Some were refugees that came here after the Spanish Inquisition in 1492, that bolstered possibly some earlier Jewish communities that likely had existed in it from Roman times, even from the destruction of the temple. This community, though, this synagogue survived, in which many synagogues in the area did not. So today it's more a national monument. There aren't regular services there today, but there are occasional services and holiday services in the community.
Rabbi, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
And it's on a small community like this that doesn't have a lot of people, who helps finance the maintenance and that? Is that from the community, from the government?
So yeah, this particular synagogue, because of its magnificence and beauty, was actually named an Italian national monument. So it receives funds to help its upkeep, and now serves as a museum where they get funding that costs for people coming to tour as well, that helps in its upkeep.
Where's the location in Italy? Is it near Como or up in the
Yeah,
north?
it's actually very close to Turin, Italy. Here, I can put up a map if it can be seen. Let me. Share the screen, but I'll show you here. Hopefully the map will show up on your screen. Are you guys seeing the map? I guess it's showing Beechwood right now, but I'm going to type in and you'll see that it's between Milan and Turin, but specifically close to Turin, Italy, in the north of Italy.
Jewish community of
I remember seeing the model of a northern Italian synagogue It was either at the Museum of the Diaspora or the Israel Museum in Israel, and it was like a little jewel box. And it had all that splendor, but it was like a little jewel box, whereas this one has a full, full splendor with the dome, and I guess it has a high ceiling and everything.
Yeah, I'll go back to it to show you the ceiling, which is actually one thing that I think is particularly unique and interesting. If you can see the map here, we're between Milan and Turin in northern Italy in the Piedmont region. That's where the synagogue is located.
I think Geneva.
So if you're ever in this region, definitely something to check out, north of Genoa.
Oh, I see.
But I want to share. Oh, here, it's in here. If you can see the synagogue now, we're going to look at the ceiling of the synagogue.
Oh my.
Because at the top of the synagogue, it does have a high vaulted roof here in Baroque style. It actually has Hebrew words, Zeh Sha'ar Hashamayim. Literally, this is the gate of heaven. And I think is very powerful. You look up at the sky and see these words. I'm really looking up towards the heavens. This is the gates of heaven. And Sha'ar Shamayim actually itself is the name of synagogues. I don't know if we have the original name. Now, today it's called the Casale Monferrato Synagogue. But really looking up, you get this image of kind of looking up at the gates of heaven as you look up in the synagogue. So this synagogue, sorry?
Where is it?
Sorry, this is and it's in northern Italy. We just shared, yeah, in between Turin and Milan, in northern Italy. But this is just one of many examples of synagogues that were built in the style that highlighted the time that it was built and the place it was built. Here, this synagogue, people might be familiar with, Mikveh Israel, the synagogue in Curacao, built in the Dutch style by Dutch Jews coming to the New World. This synagogue completed in the year 1674, the oldest synagogue in continuous use in the Americas. And they built it in the style of the Portuguese synagogue in Amsterdam, which was many of the Dutch Jews came from the Spanish Inquisition in Portugal. The interior, which we'll look at, is most notable for the sand on the ground. And we can look at an image of that. This I'll just move slowly, but designed to look like the Portuguese synagogue in Amsterdam, where many of the original Jews in Curacao came from. And there were two reasons that they used sand on the ground. One is to remember the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness in the desert of the Israelites.
Zoom, I told you, the synagogues around the world, it's really cool. Incredible one in Italy.
If you want to mute just after
We're looking at them.
you're sharing, but the other reason that the synagogue had sand flooring is also harkening back to a practice in Portugal when it wasn't permissible for Jews to practice their Judaism. It was known that some Portuguese synagogues and communities would cover the floor with sand to muffle their sound so that people wouldn't know what was happening in their houses of worship and in the places they were worshiping. There are only 4 synagogues left today that have the sand floors, all in the Caribbean and in the colonies to recall what happened in Portugal. There's this synagogue in Curacao. There's a synagogue in St. Thomas. There's a synagogue in Kingston, Jamaica, and then a synagogue in Suriname, which is part of South America, but also was a colony as well. So hopefully this gives a sense of the style, but built in the style and using the style of the people and the community that Curacao was built in. This synagogue, of course, the oldest synagogue still in continuous use in the Americas. Another synagogue that you may be familiar with, some of you, if anyone's visited, please feel free to share. But the Toro Synagogue, the oldest synagogue in the United States, in use today, built in the classical colonial style. And you can see it in this picture here. We see many colonial buildings, doesn't need to be Jewish, that were built in this style. This synagogue probably most well known for its visit, for the visit by George Washington, who declared here kind of the freedom for all religions and all peoples to worship as they see fit. And that letter from George Washington to the congregation still read every year on the anniversary of when George Washington visited the congregation. So has anyone, I'll stop the share, anyone visit the Toro Synagogue here? Or the synagogue in Mikveh, Israel, in Curacao, if anyone wants to share their feelings or how they felt their
Rabbi,
perception from visiting. Yeah.
the Mikveh Israel sort of looks like the one in Savannah.
Yes.
Oh, because.
Good. So the synagogue in Savannah, also called Mikveh Israel,
Yeah.
I think is based on the same model.
Right.
So they use the same name. I can pull up also a beautiful synagogue, and I can share just the exterior. But yeah, Lynn.
Well, it's funny, when you're on the cruise and you get off in Curacao, you follow the line of Jews going to find the synagogue, and there in the line was Rabbi Rosie and her family. Her
Oh,
husband.
nice.
It's like, it's a small world again.
Yes, it's a small. It is. So he.
Where is
I didn't
Turo
have-
Synagogue? Where is?
Sorry.
Where is Turo Synagogue?
Oh, sorry. Turo Synagogue. I meant to say is actually in Newport, Rhode Island.
Rhode Island.
Yep.
It's in Rhode Island. This is Mikveh Israel in Savannah, actually.
Rabbi, I actually do have I can share about the Savannah one.
Yes.
We were walking and this was before, we still had maps at the time and we were following, and we were, I was looking for it. It was on a Shabbat and I was looking at, and I knew it had to be someplace there in the square, and I'm looking, can't find anything because the building, the windows look like they have crosses on them, if you see. So to me,
Yes.
it was like a church, and then we passed it by. Finally, we found it, and then we went in, and there was a triple girl bat mitzvah, b'nai mitzvah, and it was really very, very reformed, but it was really nice, but it's beautiful inside.
Good. And I think these are some pictures from inside the synagogue here.
We took a class
yeah.
there, Rabbi. We took a
Yeah.
class there. So we were in the synagogue for a week, in the classrooms, in the museum. It's very interesting. It was a Rhodes Scholar class, and they had items in their museum that were brought over still on the boat that they came. They were some of the earliest Jewish settlers.
Yes.
For some reason, I remember the important thing for them to bring was the kit for a bris. And I remember seeing that there, as well as even other Jewish artifacts that they brought on. Most of them came on the one ship. They were leaving the Iberian Peninsula. And it's still a very active congregation now.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But it was fascinating. It was a lesson in not just in Jewish history in the United States, but American history, because the settlers that were there worked with Oglethorpe in developing the
area. No, and Savannah is one of the earliest Jewish community settlements in the United States, Charleston as well. Jews came to this region very early on.
Rabbi, by the way, the entire back wall, from what you're seeing, is a huge pipe organ with on top the room for the choir. but the entire wall is that.
Okay, good. Well, good now, but a good example, like the other synagogues, and even dating back to the Alt Neuschule in Prague, synagogues were built in the style of their time. And right, some synagogues look like churches because that was the architectural style and the Gothic style that cathedrals were built. We saw that even dating back the first session, that the synagogue in Prague and many others. But as we're entering a modern era, architectural styles are changing. And that's what I want to look at as we move forward. This synagogue, some may
Rabbi?
have been in. Yeah,
Can I just interrupt for a minute?
yeah, definitely.
Do you have any photo of the Turo Synagogue in New Orleans? I did many, many years ago see the synagogue. It was just on a bus tour through the city, so I only saw it from the outside. But, and how much younger is it than the one in Rhode Island?
I would just need to look. I don't have it with me. I actually was on a tour in New Orleans and went to the Turo Synagogue there as well. But I don't. It's more recent than the one in Rhode Island. But I would need to look that up if you want. I mean,
Okay.
I could look that up after and let
Okay,
you know
thanks.
next time, or if you want to check, that would be great to share with us. But another beautiful synagogue that is one of the oldest, if not the oldest, in New Orleans. Synagogues, as we've seen and as we know, are built kind of in a style of their time. And we know even from B'nai Yeshurun, when the new building was built, there was this concept, this idea that we wanted a new architectural style, and there was an architect brought in and discussion about how the synagogue should look, and how everything should be designed. I want to take a time though to look at how synagogues, especially in modern day, and this one is even one of the older ones we'll look at, built in 1958 by Frank Lloyd Wright, the design of Beth Shalom in Elkins Park, most well known because this is the one synagogue that Frank Lloyd Wright designed and built. This is a picture of the sanctuary. And it was designed, if you can see the picture here, he designed it to represent kind of like Mount Sinai, like you're coming to the mountain. This synagogue was built in a different style than we've seen before. Mayan revival architecture is kind of the name of the architectural style. But really the idea that the congregation had was to really do something different, to really create a prayer space that would inspire kind of a spiritual, create a prayer space that would create kind of a spiritual space that would kind of give people a different sense of prayer and really get them in the mindset and in the mood for a deep spiritual experience. And we'll just take a look inside. This is a conservative congregation, by the way. But this is, we'll just move around the ark and the words Kadosh above it. And as you look up, in some ways, like B'nai Yeshurun today, kind of has this very high space above the ark, but here it's a pyramid design. I'm looking all the way up. And I guess as we're going through some of these newer synagogues, I guess what I'm keeping in mind and what you can keep in mind is kind of how it would feel to pray or to be in this space. Would it lend itself to a powerful prayer experience? I mean, that's really what many of the modern architects and modern synagogue designs are looking at, how to create a powerful prayer experience. And many of them use windows and other modern design to reach their goal of creating a powerful place for spiritual prayer and for a spiritual experience. So is there anyone here that's prayed or gone to Beth Shalom in Elkins Park? This is in the suburbs of Philadelphia.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
I have a question. In 1958, a place like that, how have you estimated the cost, what the cost would be there to build such a
the cost to build such a building?
Yes, how much they,
we could look it up right now. What's I don't know.
I mean, that would be
but
interesting to see.
I don't know.
it's gonna be a historical place because of
Yeah.
Lakewood Drive
Right.
and irreplaceable.
Yeah, well, we can see. We can see if we have, if we have that information. I don't know if it's going to be listed here, but I'll try to look that up for us next time. I don't know if I
It
can
would
find
be
it
interesting
quickly.
to see.
But yeah, the cost of building and many of these synagogues that we're going to see actually there was a big cost in building them. But I wanted to move here some different designs. Hebrew University and Mount Scopus, what they did, which was unique in a more recent building. This is Mount Scopus overlooks Jerusalem, really it's in the northern end of Jerusalem. And in their synagogue, what you can see, their design was unique in that in the very front of the synagogue is a window, as you can see, and we'll look, here's the front. Instead of the ark being at the front, you have this window pane. And the ark is actually right on the side of the window. If you can see, is the Torah and the ark is actually to the side. An unusual setting because they recognized that they had something unusual, that you can look out this window right on the old city of Jerusalem. Look directly at the Kotel, the Dome of the Rock, the Temple Mount, right into the old city. And so when you sit in the sanctuary, you're actually, rather than looking at the ark is to the side, you're actually looking right at Jerusalem, right at the space that that we pray toward. So this is another modern design. And now I want to look at modern design from an ancient design. This is the Chorva synagogue in the old city of Jerusalem. This synagogue is really a synagogue a few hundred years old. The Rambam synagogue was built, I don't have the exact date, let me pull that up. But this synagogue, it was known, and if you visited Jerusalem before the year 2010, all that was here in this site was an arch of a previous synagogue that existed on this site. The Chorva synagogue was founded in the early 18th century and was destroyed, and it was resettled again in 1864, but again was destroyed in 1967. And then there was a rebuilding project right in the heart of the old city. This white dome is probably the most, outside of the Kotel itself, but is the most notable dome and kind of the most notable feature of the skyline of the Jewish quarter of the old city of Jerusalem today. Was rebuilt in the style that it had been originally. And we'll look in the inside. The style incorporates some of the old wood, but also the white. And we can see kind of how in the old city of Jerusalem, they blended old and new in what was an old structure, but today is a very modern synagogue in many ways as well. Here's the ark. And if you were in Jerusalem before 2010, this synagogue didn't exist, just the ruins of the previous synagogue structure that had been on this site.
That's right. The arch. All you saw was the arch, as I remember.
Right. There was just an arch there. Right. Today, the whole synagogue has been rebuilt and is used daily for prayer.
Right after it was built, our grandson was supposed to be getting his chumash, and they brought his entire class to the synagogue, and they received their chumash from the bima there.
Oh, very nice. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful synagogue and an old synagogue that's become new again. In many communities, though, that are building new places, they are taking the contemporary design and building incredible structures in many cases. And we'll kind of spend the rest of the time looking at some of these structures. This is Centro Israelita Sionista, the synagogue in San Jose, Costa Rica, which I think I mentioned in an earlier class, is completely hidden from view from the rest of the city. You wouldn't even know it exists until you kind of go through tunnel or parking garage and then come into a field where you see this synagogue and the grounds of the synagogue. Inside, we'll see some pictures here. This is the inside, and we'll look at inside the sanctuary in a minute, but also the back ground as well. And here we'll quickly go through the sanctuary that in Costa Rica, which actually has, a community of a few thousand Jews here in San Jose, has built a synagogue. And we'll notice this in many modern designs, that the synagogue is round to create an experience where the community is kind of praying in a circle as everyone is around the community, as opposed to a frontal design. And we'll see both. But here it's a round design, and this is the front. Ko amar Hashem, Hashamayim kis'i v'ha'aretz hadom raglai, the bima. And we can see kind of a more contemporary modern style ceiling.
To me, it almost looked like B'nai Yeshurun's sanctuary when they showed the balcony and the circular and the letters when you see it from the bima. Anybody else?
Right, and B'nai Yeshurun as well, right, built in 1980, didn't take the style of a Moorish synagogue or synagogue. You took kind of it looked, modern American architecture there are many different designs. There's not one design, and B'nai Yeshurun, I know, hired actually a Japanese architect, but we live in an era where there are many different designs, and really the bigger question is, how is the design going to create a powerful prayer experience and a powerful communal experience? But in many ways, this synagogue in Costa Rica, there are some resemblances of our own synagogue, B'nai Yeshurun. Has anyone else been to this community in San Jose?
I was.
Yeah, anything you remember or want to share about it from your experience?
From the outside, you would never know it was a synagogue. High stone walls. And once you came inside, it was this beautiful, almost like a park. The parking is underground.
Right.
That's where the garages are.
Right, so it's really a fascinating, and I actually have relatives that live in Costa Rica and are part of this community, and was able to visit about 10 years ago. And that I recall as well, you don't even see it from the road. And in fact, we were just told a place at like a street corner to go to where there was a guard. And you wouldn't know what the guard was even there for. It was a gate that you couldn't even see where it went to, but you needed to know where where they were located and show them your passport, and then they would let you through. It was a fascinating experience,
right.
But certainly there's a lot of security just to even know that the community is there. You kind of need to know that it's there in order to get in.
Rabbi, a question for you.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of Americans living in San Jose because it's a lot cheaper and everything, but did they have their own base of native Jews in San Jose? Or is this mainly money coming in from people who've moved there?
There is a lot of money in the San Jose Jewish community. That happens to be, many of the Jews that live there, it's actually one of the most affluent communities in Costa Rica. It's certainly not an ancient community, but there are Jews that have been coming to Costa Rica, both earlier than the American expats. My relatives actually came from South America to Costa Rica and from Israel to Costa Rica. I would need to look at the exact date that the Jews started coming, but I believe already in the late 1800s, there were Jews coming for trade and for other reasons. It's not an ancient Jewish community, but it's not. It's been around for more than just the last 50 years.
Okay.
Here we see another synagogue actually in a round design. This is Lincoln Square Synagogue around the 64th Street and West End in New York City. I need to look at the exact address. Notable, this is a brand new building. It just opened in 2019. The synagogue has been in that location or near that location much longer. That's a modern Orthodox synagogue. It's the first new built synagogue in over 50 years in Manhattan. Also in the round style. And here's actually from the architect pictures of the synagogue that we can get a sense for what they were looking to do. As you can see, a brand new design to inspire prayer. This is what the building looks on the outside. To get a sense of Lincoln Square Synagogue in Manhattan, a brand new building. The synagogue, this particular synagogue, used had a round sanctuary even before this building, but really completely renovated their location. And actually built a completely new space, and we see kind of this even in the top, kind of mimicking the stars in the sky, that Jews should be as numerous as the stars in the sky, mimicking that in the design here. Another design, this is the Cuban American Jewish community, Beth Shmuel in South Miami Beach. A unique design, also representative of kind of a new era of architecture that were not only, although some synagogues being built today are in the designs that were previously used for synagogues, but there's much more openness and feeling, and Jewish communities have more openness to design, or to bring in architects to design synagogues in new ways that have not been seen before.
Rabbi, I just wanted to make a point that synagogues also, their architecture has to reflect function. And at one time they were like the JCCs of their neighborhoods, and that's no longer a purpose of synagogues. On the other hand, we went to one in Plainview, New York, in Long Island, that had incredible entertaining facilities. In other words, it was a great hospitality. It even had, a full size bar and all kinds of amenities, as if you had gone to a Landerhaven or something like that was built into the synagogue. So they saw a different need and a different function, and their architecture was reflective of that.
No, so 100%, and that's is a great point. And so the synagogues that we're seeing, some serve simply as a house for prayer, some serve different purposes as well. In fact, as many of you may know, right, in the first half of the 1900s, the 1920s, an idea from Mordechai Kaplan that the synagogue should serve as the Jewish center, right? That it should not only be a place for prayer, but a place to come together as community. With fitness centers, sometimes with swimming pools. You can go, there's even a synagogue in Queens, New York, a conservative synagogue, Beth Shalom in Pittsburgh, that have swimming pools or gyms in their synagogue. The Jewish center model, right, ultimately spawned the Jewish community centers, which we have now, the Jewish community centers of North America, spread in many communities, including Cleveland. But before the Jewish community center movement, there was this idea that the synagogue should be the center. And the synagogues themselves in many places housed the gyms and the pools and the gathering spaces and the entertainment spaces. And the synagogue in Plainview may be from that era when it was built.
We had that in Cleveland when Park Synagogue was on 105th. It was called the Jewish Center. And there was a gymnasium in there as well as a swimming pool.
Right, and that's from that era before the JCCs, this idea of the synagogue should be the center where everyone comes. In fact, and Fran mentioned, today, right, in Cleveland, we don't have that anymore, and people have built new synagogues. Many of the synagogues on Long Island in particular have retained that name, Jewish Center. So there's the Plainview Jewish Center or the Huntington Jewish Center, or many of the cities use that name, Jewish Center, instead of, like we call B'nai Yeshurun congregation. Jewish Center is actually the term for many of the synagogues, and Long Island it is an area where that was very prevalent, and so many of the synagogues actually retain that name, Jewish center, as opposed to congregation.
Rabbi?
Yeah. Mhm.
The JCC in Akron, I don't remember how many years ago, but I believe it's the conservative shul in Akron is actually built onto the JCC in Akron. Maybe it's been maybe one of you, some of you might
Yes.
know, but I think it's called Betham. But yeah, it's actually built right in. So they call
Right,
it
so
the shul with the pool.
Right, so that's actually happened in reverse. I don't know if someone wants to share that the synagogue had its own building and actually sold and actually built into the JCC later, just in the last 5 years. But now, right, one great advantage to their synagogue, and they advertise it, I think, too, is you're at the synagogue and the synagogue is housed right in the JCC. They actually built it into the JCC.
Well, I think Akron was consolidating as their population got smaller. And when they sold their building, if I'm not mistaken, the Reform congregation at one point was sharing the space with them. I don't know if they still are or not. And I know the Orthodox still have their own building on Revere Road.
Yes.
But the conservative just could not maintain. I think after Rabbi came and left there, they had significant problems and losing members, both through death as well as people moving out. And so in order to...
For 30 seconds and then I'll come back on, okay?
Sorry, Ellen, it muted, but
No.
okay. Helen, I don't know if you finished, but it got muted.
No,
okay.
all I said was the Federation, the Akron Federation is also on that same campus, sharing
Yes.
all those buildings.
Yes, no, thank you. Thank you. And that is happening in some communities where the population is shrinking or the communities are selling their buildings. We might see this even more in reverse. This happened, and actually, I lived in San Antonio, Texas, for a year as student rabbi, and before studying to be a rabbi. And one of the community synagogues there, I don't know if it still is today, but there was a synagogue that utilized space in the JCC to consolidate space that just didn't have the means for its own building. That being said, there still are many communities that are building new buildings, and we see actually in front of us, this is the liberal Jewish congregation in Amsterdam, a new building, new construction. And this building was built both as a sanctuary and doesn't have a gym or pool, but also built as a place to congregate the community together.
I'm kind of interested because my son and his family live in Amsterdam, and they constantly say that I wouldn't relate to anything because it's all super Orthodox in Amsterdam.
Wow.
Where exactly is this? Is this in the city center or somewhere in the outskirts?
To be honest, I'm not exactly sure, but we can quickly find out.
Rabbi?
Yeah?
It's away from the city center. My son and family belong to that shul.
Oh, they belong there?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
And
no, thank you.
It's actually tendency more towards reform. And they have over 1,700 members.
This is in Europe, the Amsterdam in Europe.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was looking at your scroll there. Okay. 1,700 members.
This is yeah, that's what I had recalled. It's not right in the city center, but it is. It's outside the center of the city, but it's a large congregation, and a beautiful. Oh, wrong. Now I lost my. Oh, here. If you can see this, these are some pictures that will just. Oh, right. But we'll just look through to see a modern design here and how they decided to design their sanctuary in particular. But you could see modern meeting spaces, the grounds, right? You can see it's outside the major center here. But here's the sanctuary. And here you have people facing one another. And in front of us, we have kind of the wall and the arc in front. And you have multiple rows of balconies. Not an Orthodox synagogue, right? It's a liberal synagogue. So the spaces are for anyone. It's not that this was designed for as a women's section. But a unique design representing a modern era of religious spaces. And maybe if you said your children live in it, you have a child that's in Amsterdam. So maybe they can check this out, not right in the city center, but there are liberal Jewish communities. And I know, actually, I think Maddie Jackson is with us. I know worked with some progressive communities and or was in Europe and toured some communities throughout Europe. Is not exclusive. While there are many Orthodox synagogues and many of the old synagogues still maintain the Orthodox rite, there are many progressive synagogues and Masorti synagogues throughout Europe as well.
I wonder if it's primarily expats because there are so many of them.
Actually, there are some expats, but not mostly.
Okay.
I davened there last October. I was there for a month, and I went with my son and daughter-in-law, my grandbaby there.
Yeah, very nice. So good. How was it? So you said it's more of a Reform style prayer service.
Exactly. It was actually a very beautiful service.
Good. Good. So no, thank you. Thank you. And here we'll just share, we just have about 10 minutes left, so I'll run through, but please stop for any questions, but I will, or thoughts or experiences, but I'll just share a few more buildings, both in the United States, Israel, and around the world. This is the Evanston Reconstructionist Congregation, Evanston, Illinois, that also built a new structure, and you can see the windows and light. We'll just see if you can see some of the pictures here. Is it coming up on your screen? Just to get a sense of modern synagogue design. Here's the inside of the sanctuary and the windows from the inside. And Beth Shalom in San Francisco, a brand new design, a unique synagogue design here.
Doesn't exactly blend in, does it?
Right, doesn't exactly blend in to the area that it's around. And there was a lot of discussion at this synagogue, if you can see the pictures here. A lot of thought about what the design represented and how it created a powerful space for prayer. Here's the sanctuary.
What do people think that looks like? The thing that's shaped like, kind of like, to me, it looks like a menorah, the bottom of a menorah. I don't know.
So they actually, right, this is the architect's website that describes exactly what they were looking to do. But a slice of sky in the ceiling turns into the eternal light above the ark on the eastern wall. But right, what does it look like to you? I guess a lot of this is they had their reasons for their design, but does anyone have any thoughts? What does this remind you of, the outside, or what does it hearken to? This is pictures of the sanctuary here that we're looking at.
I don't know. I was thinking maybe heaven and earth. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it could be. This is their chapel inside. But definitely a unique design.
Okay.
Here's the design.
Inside, it's like an ark.
It kind of looks like an ark, like Noah's Ark even, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
The way the seats are.
Yeah. But right, unique designs. Here's the Soho Synagogue in New York City. Soho. The new synagogue this is in Germany. And this is the interior design. The new synagogue in Mainz, which I will show you, is a very unique design. And someone I think said were in Mainz. I don't know if the synagogue existed yet. But a very unique architectural design that you can kind of see behind the trees here. This is the Mainz, the new congregation in Mainz, Germany. With a lot of angles, similar also to the Jewish Museum in Berlin, similar style. If anyone's been to the Jewish Museum in Berlin, this is what the architecture of the building looks like, architectural design. This is another synagogue, a new synagogue in Germany, in Ulm, where they use light behind the sanctuary. I'll just share a quick picture of what it looks like inside the synagogue, inside the sanctuary. You can see a picture of the ark and the light from the Jewish star-shaped windows right behind. And in Munich, a lot of new synagogues coming and a determination by Germany to try to revive Jewish spirit and Jewish life after of course the horrors of the Nazis and an earlier time. Germany doing what they can to rebuild Jewish life, or attempt to rebuild Jewish life. And this is Ohel Jacob. This is inside the synagogue, a synagogue about 15 years old today. One of my favorite and really powerful, we'll jump inside what this synagogue looks like. This is in Santiago, Chile. Built a brand new Jewish center, Jewish community center and synagogue. And we'll just take a look inside for a minute. And I'll focus on the sanctuary. This is the sanctuary. And what most notable to me is the front of the sanctuary, which you'll see is entirely stained glass. Here's the outside with the stained glass. It's taking a minute to load, so I'm going to actually just go to the picture here. But here's a picture of the front of the synagogue, all in stained glass, the entire front of the synagogue. A couple examples in Israel. This is the Heichal Yehuda synagogue in Tel Aviv, shaped like a seashell. And here's the front where you enter and the way the bima is designed. And finally, this is actually at an army base. This is a synagogue built to resemble the burning bush. And you come inside, and here's the inside of the prayer space. And actually right next to the burning bush, I'll show you a picture. They've also built a structure to resemble Mount Sinai. If you can see the picture, here's the burning bush synagogue, and here's Mount Sinai next to it. And the idea behind this design is it's built at the IDF's officer school, is kind of to represent the place where you get your calling where you agree to be a leader of soldiers. They wanted to hearken back to the place where Moses essentially got his calling to lead the Jewish people. So I'm going to stop the share. Just a handful of examples of modern synagogue architecture and design from the United States, Israel, Germany, Santiago, and other places. And there's new designs all over the world that really are re-envisioning what the synagogue space can look like. So I want to turn, if there's any thoughts that anyone has, or any other synagogues that you've been to, perhaps, that we can look at in the future. Yeah, Nina and then Helen, I see, yeah.
Actually, Larry wanted to know, where is that last synagogue in Israel? Do you know? What part is it?
Ahad. Well, it's actually not in a city. It's at an army base. I need to look exactly where that specific army base is in Israel, but it's not in a city.
Okay, an army base. All right, thanks.
When you were talking about the Italian synagogue near Turin,
yes.
It kind of reminded me, not all the ornateness, but the idea of the Italian Baroque synagogue. If you're in Jerusalem, you can go to the Italian synagogue, One,
Yes.
it's a functioning synagogue. Two, there's a museum there where they have dismantled a synagogue in Italy and reconstructed it at the Italian synagogue in the museum part. And it's the tour is very interesting because you go behind the scenes. And two, the synagogue itself, we were there for a service and it just blew my mind to see the Chumash in Hebrew on one side and Italian on the other.
No, a beautiful place and transported, lifted from Italy and rebuilt exactly the same structure in Jerusalem. A beautiful place, yeah.
That one synagogue in Germany with all those angles looks insane.
The one in Mainz. Yeah, no, there are all sorts of new synagogue designs that are, and the one in Mainz, a very unique synagogue. But Mainz, of course, is a very old Jewish community.
Well, people, when you go to shul, you want sanity, you want comfort, love, and everything.
Now, maybe it won't be the synagogue that you attend. Well, none of us may, but if you're in Mainz, you can visit to see it in person.
Rabbi, the synagogue in Germany, the Halle synagogue that had the terrorist attack, is that anywhere near the ones you showed us in Germany? The Halle synagogue?
I'm not sure. Does anyone? I'm not sure.
They had the terrorist attack there.
I have a question about.
I can look. I don't know. Sorry,
Germany.
Karen, yeah.
The security in Germany around all the synagogues. Is there stations where, are you safe to go into the sanctuaries and stuff like that, or what?
So look, that's going to be a personal feeling. There is a lot of security throughout Europe at synagogues and really throughout the world. I mean, I shared what it was like in Costa Rica, but throughout Europe, there's a lot of security to get into the synagogues. In my experience going to synagogues in Europe, I've felt safe going into synagogues. I don't know if anyone experienced. I know that you do. There are security guards. I'm just like we have at B'nai Yeshurun, but it feels even more security in many parts of Europe. I've never felt unsafe going into the synagogue, and there's always been a security presence. But that's probably more of a personal preference. I don't know if anyone wants to share from experiences going to synagogues in Europe or in Germany. Fran, yeah.
Well, I've been to the synagogue, the main synagogue in Vienna, which was also near an attack recently. And basically we went with a group. We had to be pre-approved. It had to be a Friday night or a Saturday morning. They check your passports against their list. And as a matter of fact, this was really booming when we were there. There was some bar mitzvah, and it was, busy. And as I was trying to find a seat in the women's section upstairs, I kept getting booted out by local women who said that was their seat. Everything was reserved and everybody knew exactly where everybody would sit. So it was not this kind of open door thing that you would imagine. The only places that are kind of open door are places such as Krakow, where they're really tourist attractions and not working synagogues as such. And my children are always very critical about the fact that in Europe, you pay to go in to see synagogues, whereas often the churches are free, okay? And the reason is you don't get state funding for the synagogues, and they rely on private donations. So you walk into a synagogue, you're expected to pay for that visit.
Yeah, no, that's true. Many synagogues, in addition to security, you actually need to have a passport and be pre-registered even to go into where there's synagogues. So it's not always easy to get into a synagogue, except many that have now become kind of more tourist sites. But I've felt secure once you're able to get in, but it's not always easy to get in.
I know when we traveled to Italy and on a Jewish heritage tour, most of the places had security all around the synagogues.
Yeah. It's no different here. We were in Germany. with a Jewish tour, and they apologized to us for the police that were in front. And I said, I come from Cleveland, Ohio, and when I walk into the synagogue, there, first of all, it's locked. I don't just walk in and I'm a member. And I said, and there are police there.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, it's all over. But I did not feel any more frightened in those synagogues than I would anywhere else. Someday I would talk to you about Morocco. That was an entirely different situation.
Good. So no, thank you. And I'll just mention, and then if anyone wants to stay on and share, feel free. But speaking of Morocco, and we'll move forward. So next week is Thanksgiving. We won't meet, but we'll have 3 remaining classes after Thanksgiving. And the next week we'll look at synagogues in Muslim majority lands, of which Morocco is one. And then the week after, following, in anticipation of Hanukkah, the next session after that will be synagogues in Greek lands, or Greek synagogues, and some Roman synagogues in what was Greek territory. But thank you. It's great to learn with you and to hear from your experiences as well. And so next week there's no class, but we'll meet again in 2 weeks. And feel free to stay on if there's anything that you want to share, or questions and things that I could maybe look up if I don't know for the next class in a couple weeks.